One.
It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. Come
Good evening, good evening, good evening. It's Wednesday, August the 13th, 2014, and welcome to the BCS Experience, History, Arts, Culture, and Politics in Review and Discussion. I'm Byron C. Saunders, your host with the most. The BCS Experience takes a look at our rich history, African American history. We're going to share with you some known and unknown historical facts and information from the past, and connect the dots on how they have impacted on our present-day events and how they will definitely shape our future as African Americans in this country and around the world. The BCS Experience, History, Arts, Culture, Politics, in Review and Discussion. This is Internet Radio and will be aired live every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. from the studios of the VW Moving Images on the GoPro Radio Network. You know, I'm really excited about this opportunity to talk to you all across the country and around the globe. You see, I want you to tune in every week on your computer or your phone. I want you to become a loyal listener, and I personally invite you to lend your voice to this radio talk show to express your opinions on my weekly topics. This is social network radio at its finest. Now, here's the number for you to call in to be a part of the discussion. Call 347-884-9839. Once again, that number to call is 347-884-9839. This week's topic, oh my goodness, global conflicts, police shootings and killings of innocent and unarmed folks, racial hatred and bigotry, tensions all across the country.
Sometimes diabetes can feel more like don't-abetes. Don't do this, don't forget that. But with a little help from Walgreens, diabetes won't slow you down. Stop by to get expert pharmacy advice 24/7 and savings on medications and supplies. You can even get rewarded for healthy behaviors like logging your glucose. Walgreens has just what you need to do more with diabetes. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Limitations apply. For full program terms and conditions, visit walgreens.com/healthy-choices.
Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready for this?
Young girls in Nigeria, Russia and the Ukraine, Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Israel, and everywhere you turn, there is chaos. Are we about to explode with the tensions being seen and experienced globally? Now, how are you coping with it all? Or are you totally stressed out too? Oh, my goodness, we got a lot to talk about this evening. My show is the new Underground Railroad Express. Next stop is your neighborhood. All aboard to freedom and Freedom Land. But before we get started and get a chance to meet my featured call-in guest, a little bit of history to bring it all into full context. The date. It's Tuesday, 12th, the year 1890. You see, on this date in 1890, the Mississippi Constitutional Convention began systematic exclusion of blacks from the politics of the South. The Mississippi Plan, as it was known, literacy and understanding tests lasted until November the 1st of that year and was later adopted with embellishments by other states. South Carolina, 1895. Louisiana, 1898. North Carolina, 1900. Alabama, 1901. Virginia, 1901. Georgia, 1908. And Oklahoma, 1910. You see, Southern states later used white primaries and other devices to exclude black voters. Once whites regained control of the state legislatures using these tactics, a process known as redemption, they used gerrymandering of election districts to further reduce black voting strength and minimize the number of black elected officials. In the 1890s, these states began to amend their constitutions and to enact a series of laws intended to reestablish and entrench white supremacy. Wow. You see, that's how the Jim Crow laws got started, folks. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. And the Southern states, post-Civil War, engaged in these political activities, and they continue right on into 2014. Wow. We got to talk about this, folks. I want to hear from you. Let's connect the dots and make sense out of it all. You can call 347-884-9839. Well, tonight I have a very special guest that's joining us. Joining me in the studio as my featured call-in guest, once again, my good friend, Reverend Dr. D.L.C. Boyce. She's a Christian certified psychotherapist and author of several books, most recently, Ministry Begins After the Fall, and her other recent book, Our Children Want to Know Why. Good evening, Reverend Dr. D.L.C. Boyce. Welcome to the BCS Experience. How are you this evening?
Blessed and highly favored. How are you?
Amen. Amen, my sister. I'm telling you, Dr. Boyce, the world is in chaos.
Oh, yes, it is.
And we need to have some serious conversations about the hot spots, what's going on. As you know, and I'm sure you've been seeing the postings on Facebook, the Internet, the news on the radio. We need some help, Dr. Boyce.
I would say I read one posting earlier this morning, and it said, surely that the Lord is soon to come. With all that is going on around the world, something is being stirred up, and it has to do with something personally. I think that there are some individual personal situations that have collected together, and the act out is either rage, it is either participating in organized evil.
Yes.
If I look at it from some sort of from a spiritual perspective, and then there are some undercurrents in the midst of what we're seeing, even in this country. There are some things that seem to have been put in place some time ago, maybe 20 years ago, while we were sleeping. And we're seeing the fruits of that today.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I started off with the historic information, the Mississippi Plan. That was in 1890, okay? So the plan that was put into place wasn't just recent. This was in 1890, and that's when the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizens Councils all across the South, the raids, the scourge, the Red Summer of 1919, when lynchings were a common day occurrence in the South and across the country, and the destruction of black towns. Like Greenwood, Oklahoma, the suburb of Tulsa, destroyed in 1921 by white riots. So, I mean, this is not an unusual. This is not an anomaly, Dr. Boyce. And like yourself, now I'm calling in from off-site because I couldn't get into the studio. But I tell you, Dr. Boyce, I'm gonna just start off with the most recent. Because I want to hear your take on it, because we're at a point right now where I see the pot boiling and about to explode. As you know, just a couple of days ago was the anniversary of the Watts riots that happened in 1965. So let's go right to the beat of the pulse of the public. Let's go to the most recent in St. Louis, Ferguson, St. Louis. You know what happened there? That young man killed by police, and then left in the streets like an animal. Broad daylight. Dr. Boyce, talk to me.
Certainly, there is a current that is happening across this nation. It's nothing new. It is something that is getting a lot of media attention now, since we've been more or less baited out by some of the recent theatrical media, the movies and et cetera, movies that they've been using to try and stir us up so that we can finally get to a point to recognize that we need to take a stand, or we need to do something, more or less. Our young people have been lost. We've been losing connection with them for the last 20 or 30 years. And so they've been forming these subgroups. And I'm not saying that this young man at all, but just follow me just for a second. They've been forming these subgroups waiting for some sort of nurturing and understanding of who they are in terms of their identity. It's something more than the fact that they were caught up being born in situations that may have involved negative or degrading circumstances, or in situations where they didn't have our nurturing, they didn't have our mothering or fathering. And so they have been subject and suspect. On the other side, you had the majority, so-called majority, they're calling themselves a minority race now, but the so-called majority race who were studying our history. Yeah. While we were sleeping and not studying our identity, it's something that is so important. It is so important. You cannot sit at a table of brotherhood if you don't know who you are. It's ridiculous. And in fact, at this time, we need to excuse ourselves from the table of brotherhood, get a sense of who we are, who our ancestors were, and et cetera, and then come back so that you sit strongly and you sit with some level of integrity. You have a third group of folk who are in charge of various agencies, not just, we're looking at police agents, but it's across the board. They are filtered in to these agencies, and they are carrying out historical Jim Crow, historical Ku Klux Klan, and historical acts being perpetrated against people who don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. So if our young people have no sense of identity, and it's obvious in what they saw as a matter of dress, what they sang as a matter of music, all of that was a cry to say, I have no identity, I'm nothing, and people who were reading the history paid for that. They paid for them to look a certain way so that when they present them to the world has no love for them. Right. And no support comes. And so I don't know. There was a posting with a panel of folk, and among the panel were two persons of color, and one was an African American. The African American, the panel was deciding on something that was a media version of American Idol. Okay. So when they came to a black gentleman, they were viewing him and deciding whether he would work for whatever process they had going. And one of them thought, he has a twinkle in his eye, he might be good. But now the African-American person made his comment, but the other person who identified himself later on as Polynesian says, I don't like him. And I asked, well, why don't you like him? He said, I don't like him because he's black. Well, if this prompted, around the panel, well, you're a minority yourself, as the African American, that says, well, we ride in together. And he says, well, that doesn't matter. I think black people have had too many events. So it's propaganda. It's marketing racism around the world so that people who formerly understood our plight in this country, for $4.50, no longer understand that. And when the media supports degrading kind of musical presentations and appearance of black people, it is a design that is seemingly has seemingly worked to put us in a negative light, and therefore not worthy, insignificant. When you shoot a young man in the street and leave him in the street, obviously you have no value for human life.
Absolutely.
When you are across the board using a chokehold, you understand, that is taking life. And I mean, it's not like it's not on TV that you saw this and you saw that it was wrong, everyone was against it, but yet you're going to use the same format. It is something, while we were sleeping, evil crept into these agencies. They studied American culture. They studied black history. They studied all of these kinds of things that would allow them to keep us down, you understand, or to consider eliminating us, without our being aware.
Now, Dr. Boyce, one of the things that is most disturbing about this young man that just got killed, not only did they just leave him in the street like a dog, a dead dog, they been perpetrating more of the lies. If it wasn't for the blog and the local residents taking their phones and filming the daylight incident that it happened itself, and then the police chief of Ferguson refusing to identify the police person who shot this kid. They literally identified the young man, the victim, but not the perpetrator. I'm astonished that this is, somebody ought to be stepping in. Justice Department says they're taking a look at the case, but the violation of the right to know, as this is a public employee who has committed a crime, and they're withholding his name. This is some serious injustice going on here. And Dr. Boyce, what I'm most concerned about is because the day in, day out constant threat of violence erupting even more, not just in Missouri, but in other hot spots where incidents like this have been ongoing day in and day out. Dr. Boyce, we're at a dangerous point right now in our country for African Americans and people of color. And the question I want to ask you, because we don't have to take a break, we can go straight through tonight, but what I want to hear is, because I'm listening to the groundswell of voices saying we need to react violently against violence. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Dr. Boyce, can we put some common sense to this, please?
If ever there was a time for churches to stand up and pull in this population, pull in populations of folk and teach them about their God connection and about their the God connection, their ancestors who experienced this same kind of injustice. Teach them how they were able to survive and produce the next generations coming up. Teach them about the sacrifices that they made. This is the time. In the South, the civil rights movement was moved by the church.
That's right.
it was the church, and not only the church. You know, we're grateful for the participation by those from the Jewish faith and others who recognize injustice because they also experienced that. What someone has done was they took the oppressed and they lynched them up, dividing them. And so instead of us looking at what is oppressing all of us, we're now oppressing each other. So we need not have violence where we're destroying our communities. We did that before, okay? Right. We need to be educated and to recognize. We need to study folk. We need to study the behavior of folk. We need not be made puppets. We need not be made buffoons, and we need not be made out to be criminals, you know, because of injustice. Okay, there was a great philosopher, and I can't repeat the words totally that he said, but it was similar to saying, don't tell me because I say take your feet off my back that I'm the racist. So we have to be careful by just throwing out terms. You know, they want us to throw out terms and say white, but there are plenty of white.
Well, I think what I'm seeing is that we are, as a people, are being baited into a violent reaction.
Yes.
And
exactly.
and there's two things that happened most recently, Dr. Boyce, that are very significant, which I hope my people are paying attention and listening to this program. Number one is that the weaponry that was used in Iraq and Afghanistan that is no longer over in those countries has been sold to police forces all across this country. And if you notice in the pictures coming out of Ferguson, they are on display so that somebody is trying to give us a strong message saying, come on, you really want to go out and start this race riot? Because if you think we're just going to lay down and let you destroy property, we're going to show you what technology and weaponry we have. And that's most frightening because at that point, the guns that we have in our community right now are BBs compared to the mass weapons of mass destruction that this organized fascist state is ready to employ. Secondly, the restrictions that were just placed on Russia, because I'm going to have to show people the connection, the trade embargo restrictions just placed on Russia put on restriction AK-47s. And Dr. Boyce, do you know within the last 3 weeks the amount of AK-47s purchased in this country, in the United States, has gone outrageous, and it's not us who are buying it. It's white folks who have been buying AK-47s off the market like they're Wonder Bread. You hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's dangerous, people, because at the point at which we're being baited to get into a violent reaction is paramount to asking for extinction.
We also have to recognize, and I wouldn't even say an also, at the top of this is the fact that this is a spiritual warfare.
Yes.
We have to recognize that when you have organizations like the Tea Party and you have the NRA playing very significant roles in all of this, that they have systematically planned. They've sat down and planned to address, to plan what is being orchestrated now at all levels. In other words, if you divided it up in a kaleidoscope, they're using spirituality in a negative sense in our classrooms. If you took a look at higher education and you got some reports from there, that is a place where racism is certainly being carried out tremendously. Yes. If you look at even some college settings, you don't know who's and not only college settings, but even in the Board of Education and et cetera, where parents say they send their kids out one way, when they come home, their personalities feel different. You've got spiritually wicked people standing behind the desk in some instances.
That's
okay?
so true.
So
right.
we cannot relax, all right? We cannot relax. The systems in general are filled with people that don't have good intent. They plan, and here's where the duality comes in. You spell out people that have ancestry in racism.
Yes.
You spell out people and you collect them together, and you get them to act out kind of 1930s, 1940s, or 50s racism. You get the next group of people, you make them look like buffoons. Okay,
yes.
So if you look at an undercurrent, and then this is just introducing another school of thought. If you are desiring to take over America, all you have to do is to introduce all of these elements and have everyone canceling each other out. Then you take over the country.
Right.
So that's just another school of thought. I felt good yesterday when I heard on TV. I was watching TV. I was actually doing my laundry, and that a governmental agency is going to start looking into the police department in Missouri. I'd say they need to do it across the board.
Absolutely. Because what's happening in Missouri has happened in New Orleans last week, happened with that police beating the grandmother up in California, happened in the shootings that happened in Minnesota, happened in the chokehold that happened in Staten Island. I mean, this is not an anomaly. This is a virus. Now, segueing, Dr. Boyce, segueing to the virus. We have got to talk about Ebola, okay? And here's where it's very, very disturbing. Ebola reminds me of the Tuskegee experiment on syphilis. It reminds me of the HIV virus, which I grew up in Washington, D.C., and when AIDS and HIV first hit as a global pandemic virus, it was announced that the virus itself was started at the National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C. in an experiment. Now, got to add one more thing. Planned Parenthood, eugenics, the concept of creating a situation in which global population reduction of people of color with the intent of making sure the white race stays a majority in power. Dr. Boyce, am I talking conspiracy or am I talking the truth? What are we dealing with?
If you look at the commercials, again, the movie experience, if you look at posters and the resurgence of a white Jesus.
Yes.
If you look at how white is being promoted, and with the absence of that, at a time when we have a black administration, certainly there should be a level of equality, if not, a little spillover of that. But the whole concept of blacks having any level of intelligence or reaching the level of president again is being whited out. If you started out right, and speaking about that, how creatively that's done.
Yeah. Yes.
But they're using minority. Well, I'll buy into that for this statement. Minority against minority.
Yes.
Taking the creme of the minority of other minorities and using them against black those of the African diaspora who are black. Because they're of the diaspora as well. And it makes it easier to cross over. So if you put brother against brother, and one is light and the other is dark, when the plan falls out, you no longer need the light brother. You can just cross over. because you found someone that looks just like you. They're being used, more or less.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what you're looking at. If a Polynesian brother who looks black, who is black, can say he doesn't like black people.
I saw that interview, yes.
Yes. This is a way for a global look. And we have to remember the term global started with Reverend Jesse Jackson when he was running for president.
Yeah.
And his statement was that, when you look at the entire world, that at the time, it was thought that, there was a white majority, and I am in no way a racist, okay? But the fact that they were that in terms of the global perspective, that they were the minority. So they have been scrambling, the undercurrent. I didn't say every white person. I said the undercurrent has been scrambling in order to decide those, that thought. So you take business and you put it in everyone's country. You use it as a marketing tool, and while you are there, taking jobs out of America and sitting in all these countries, you promote racism.
Yes. Okay. Now, I don't have to take a break, but I want to see if we have any callers on the phone, because I can't see the board, so I have to ask my engineers there if there's a caller on the phone, bring them in. Let's welcome them. You're going to have to identify yourself, caller. If not, I'm going to just continue this conversation with Dr. Boyce, because there's some other issues that I really want to touch on. If we have a caller on the air, hello, welcome to the BCS Experience. Who are you, and welcome aboard? Hello? Okay. We may not have a caller. Dr. Boyce, I'm going to segue right into the next one, because here's very disturbing again. I got to give the history, the date. It's August the 7th. It's a Sunday. It's the year 1904, and on that date, Ralph J. Bunch was born in 1904. He was an African-American scholar and diplomat known for his work in the United Nations and the first black man or woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, he was born in Detroit, Michigan, graduated from the University of California in 1927, and a doctorate in government and international relations from Harvard University in 1934. He taught political science at Howard University. And this brother, now, here's where we're going to jump from his acknowledgement as a bright intellectual who served well for his country as ambassador to the United States, and as I said, first black man or woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, Dr. Boyce, he won the Nobel Peace Prize because he served in the Office of Strategic Services from 1941 to 1944 during World War II and joined the United States Department of State in 1944. In 1945, he became the first black to head a department division in the federal government, the Division of Dependent Area Affairs. An expert trusteeship matters, Ralph Bunch participated in the writing of the United Nations Charter, and in 1946, he became director of the trusteeship division of the United Nations. Beginning in 1947, as a senior member of the staff of the United Nations Commission on Palestine, he participated in the mediation efforts that resulted in the recognition of the State of Israel. Ralph Bunch, won international recognition for his skill as a mediator, and he was awarded the 1950 Nobel Peace Prize after negotiating the 4 armistice agreements that halted the 1948-1949 Arab-Israeli War. Dr. Boyce, here we are in 2014. You have been to Israel. We are still in the grip of the Israeli-Arab Palestinian, Syria, Damascus conflict that is exploding everywhere. What in the world is going on? And I mean, you may recall Ambassador Andrew Young got fired from the United Nations for his work with trying to establish the peaceful relationship between Palestine and Israel. Dr. Boyce, talk to me.
Interesting.
Okay.
It's interesting from a biblical perspective.
Yes.
That we are so we identify ourselves as the Judeo-Christian, and now it's, every so often they will say Islamic, but we're looking at family, a family walk. We are looking at from the beginning of time.
Yes.
If you go back to
before
Ishmael
Christ.
and Isaac.
Yeah, before Christ.
We're talking, from
Old
Genesis,
Testament. Yeah.
Old Testament, right?
Yes.
Ishmael and Isaac and Esau and Jacob. We're talking. In fact, we can take it back to Abram.
Yes.
And Abraham,
Yes.
who is the father of all of these nations. We're talking family business, fighting against each other. And again, the whole concept of the loss of identity, it allows for this inroad. It allows for this infighting. When you look at the fact that the Abram was called from the same kind of situations, the same lifestyle, the same polytheistic lifestyle, and it just lifted up so that, if I can make you an example, maybe the rest, you understand, will begin to follow your way. And of course, we have that in our Christianity. We have a song that says, "If I be lifted up, then I will draw all men to me." So maybe the way that countries approach to help, maybe they need to take more of a biblical approach to some of these, how they come in as mediators for countries such as Israel and for the Palestinians. I believe it was the beginning of June, and that's when Pentecost Sunday took place.
Yes.
And of course, Pentecost means change, but it was the first time that the Pope invited not only the Islamic, but invited the Palestinians to come to have. Now, Pentecost is significant. It's so significant in terms of that's where we get people know Saturday worship and Sunday worship. That's where we get it. So yes, it's the day that Christ rose, but it was significant because it was the celebration, of the 50 weeks. So our approach, we keep using guns when the sword we should be using is the Word of God. Come in and talk to these who are related.
They are related. Let's go back to let's establish that, because when we hear this idea and notion of anti-Semite, that does not relate to these people because they are relatives. They are all Semites.
They are all Semites.
They are all Semites.
Yes,
so they cannot be anti-Semitic.
Yes, they need some relationship experts,
yes.
Who are knowledgeable of the Word of God to start having inroads in these meetings. You can't address with a sword if you have an eye for an eye.
As it is written, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth will end up leaving either or both blind or toothless, and in most cases, dead. And what's really bad right now, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum you sit on with respect to the Islamic issues, the Christian issues, or the Jewish issues, the one damning fault on all sides is the body count of children who are being killed. That cannot be denied, and I fault Israel, who has the mass weapons of destruction more than any of the other countries. I fault the Palestinians because they are continuing to use those weapons of destruction that they're like shooting BBs at an elephant when it comes to Israel's might and right. Israel has the atomic bomb. Okay? Let's be very clear about who the bully is at this table. And I fault the United States because they and Russia and North Korea, as well as Israel, have been selling weapons of destruction to everyone in that region who are perpetrating violence and confrontation. They are all guilty.
It's a spiritual war.
Yes.
And once we recognize that that's where we are, that's what we're doing. It's not only here, but it's around the world. And so we have to be mindful that if we have a large government agency like the United Nations and all of the agencies that we have that deal with global issues, I would again take a look at the stakeholders, and the folk who are yelling war.
Yeah.
It really, imagine this, that there is a collective body seeking to reduce the population around the world. And so they take on the clothing of the country and perpetrate ideas in the minds of its citizens so that they carry out evil acts against people of that country, against those who are perceived the weaker ones, or those
yes.
who are maybe not even the weaker ones, those who are perceived to be the gifted ones,
yes.
those who are perceived to be people of God, and the fear of evil is light. Okay,
yes.
And so if we could see it at from a biblical perspective, maybe we would be able to weed out in these settings, where we have police shootings and we have war going on, and we have no regard for children and teenagers and women and babies. I mean, I was watching them at a viewing where they were digging out a baby, an infant who
yes.
survived, and
yes.
it's something there's. If we have, and again, this is in our imagination, folk who are trying to make other human beings insignificant so that people's attitudes can harden against them, and they will do anything, And now, mind you, people who are willing to take that stance have stories.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff that they want to hide, things that they're afraid for the rest of the world to know. Because they will be judged, and they will feel, that they cannot, they couldn't stand in this world economy. And so they're so willing to sell their souls and participate in these acts when this imagined body, approaches.
I like the idea notion of your saying, taking it from a biblical perspective, because with that in mind, one can then begin to understand why this country and the NRA can't decide to engage in reducing weapons all across the board, guns, period. But something happened last week when James Brady died. The coroner, this blew my mind, Dr. Boyce. The coroner said the cause of James Brady's, you remember, who took the bullet for Reagan, and Reagan got injured that day, but the cause of his death was a homicide as a result of his gun wounds. For the first time, we had a medical person saying, not people killed guns killed this man, not the fact that a person killed him with a gun, but it was the result of his gun-inflicted wounds. My God, we have been waiting to hear that for quite some time, and now we have on the books that a coroner said his death was a homicide as a result of gun-inflicted wounds.
It's interesting.
That's amazing. And we need to reduce the guns because we are literally, I'm blown away. Now, going back to the biblical side of it, because the Old Testament was about fighting for every square inch of land. Okay? Putting on your armor. Put on the armor and let's go battle for God. But in the New Testament, the Prince of Peace who was born declared that to put down the sword, because if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. He said it. And
exactly.
He was born the Prince of Peace. Now, at the sake of claiming that we believe in a Judeo-Christian ethic, at what point are the Christians not being Christ supporters? Because the leader of the Christian movement said, the only way you're going to achieve peace on earth, goodwill to all men, women, children, and nations is through love. The only way.
We have to recognize that the Old Testament was God.
Yeah.
And God, it wasn't just in picking up arms, and although there were, moments like that, especially if you look at the Maccabees and things of that nature, and that was because they had fallen out of a place with God because they were not following Him. So God was saying, by my Spirit. So you had God leading many of us. If God said, these are, I want you to clear out this territory because these, and they were also His children, had not followed. He wanted their cousins to stand up and be evangelists, and this would be Israel. This would be Israel that, later on taken by the Assyrians and never coming back and all of that kind of. But this stand up, I want to use you as an example. And they would stand up just for a bit, but then that old nature, you understand? And that Jesus was dealing with our nature when he came on the scene. That old nature would continue to kick up, and when it kicked up, they fell out of relationship with God, and God did not stop loving. And that's all our ancestors. We're saying Israel and the Jews. That's all of our ancestors.
Which makes me want to ask the question, Dr. Boyce, because we got a lot of folks in this country who have been disconnected from the spiritual side of this. Are African Americans some of God's chosen people?
We are all God's chosen.
See? You see what I'm saying?
We are all God's chosen people.
Okay, because the chosen people, not just the Jews. Because
we are the Jews.
We are them. The Jewish people came from Africa.
And what we have to realize is some of the sacrifices that they made. They taught us how to vote. They taught. If we look at the outer exterior, we're looking at skin color. That's one thing because that's the devil's game. That's the enemy's game. Okay, but truth is that there was some, and I'm not saying. I mean, we've had some horrible experiences among all of us for things, but the fact is, there have been those who have made sacrifices. I mean, look right here in Brooklyn. We're honored to have Eric Adams, but we were also honored to have Martin Markowitz because he was dedicated, and nobody can say anything to him. Senator Schumer, and I'm just naming just one or two people. We're ready to point, and because that's how you play the lynch game, okay? And we need not do that. We are all that.
All right.
A lot of the civil rights movements was financed by that.
I've got to segue into one last thing. We actually got only 5 minutes left, Dr. Boyce. I know this has been extraordinary, but I got to give honor to the ancestors in this next historic piece, and that is on the date. It is August the 12th. The year, it's a Friday. The year is 1921. You see, on this date, Lockhart versus Evans and al. Was filed in Tulsa County District Court, Oklahoma. This was the legal action from a group of African Americans against the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, to rebuild their neighborhoods destroyed by the Tulsa race riots earlier that summer. 1921, Black Wall Street, the richest black community in America, destroyed by white racial riots. Why? Because they were successful. Why? Because they had oil. Why? Because they didn't need the white establishment to validate their existence. We need to honor those ancestors. And play Black Wall Street is coming back up. Kind of a little commercial here, for which I played Dr. A.C. Jackson, yes. But yes. It's coming back September 18th through the October the 5th in the Bronx at the Andrew Freeman home. But I got to tell people, you got to honor the ancestors, because as you recall, I started off with the Mississippi Plan. And folks, it's not an accident what's happening today in Ferguson, Missouri, Brooklyn, New York, Staten Island, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Detroit. You pick a place. They're not accidents, ladies and gentlemen. They are the results of an insipid and an insidious, well-constructed, evil plan of control. Never doubt that there is a connection. We have to connect the dots, Dr. Boyce. So I'm going to let you have one more thing to say, and then I got to close the show.
And I'm going to divide that. Let me take just a portion of that one more thing. And just remember, Ralph Bunche was born at a time in 1904 when they had the Azusa Street movement with William Seymour, who was the founder of the Pentecostal movement. I just wanted to interject that. Out of his movement came the Assemblies of God, came the Baptist movement. They came from all over the world to be in this 3-year revival that took place in California. And so we cannot leave out the spiritual. If we have our folk across the board, if we are not underneath the blood of Jesus Christ, if we are not making sure our spiritual needs are met and addressed, and that it flows to a family, there was a time when you didn't have the choice of whether you were going to church or not. You understand? Yeah. We have to be empowered by our God. Know who we are. Know that our ancestors could only bring forth the next generations because of their faith in God, and that without our faith and without our understanding that our identity starts way back, we were in the beginning, all of us. Okay, we are all Abraham's children. Okay,
Amen.
And when Christ came, He was seeking all of us out. You know, there were a number of tribes that He was seeking all of us out. And so it starts with find a church home. It starts with pastors. Look, as you pick up the Bible, pick up your history book, pick up your newspaper, and find out, you understand, what's going on that will help to build your community. You understand?
All right.
And please, last second, don't forget, you need counseling.
Amen.
You need to have therapy. Don't shy therapy. Come and have a conversation. It would save all of the heart attack, stroke, and stress and diabetic conditions that we have going on in our community.
Dr. Boyce, thank you so very much. This has been the BCS Experience on the GoPro Radio Network, your social network's live talk radio show. Folks, we could keep going on. I'm going to have to have you come back, Dr. Boyce, because we're going to lead folks how to get this support so that they don't stress out, so that they don't lose their mind. Folks, I got to thank my crew, Tylon Eusebius, Washington producer, Patrick Pieria, online engineer, Tiffany Drayton, production assistants, and a special thank you to the Jazz Lounge Project and Andrew Julian Myers for my fabulous show's theme music. I gotta go, folks. So listen, come on back next week for the BCS Experience, and join me next Wednesday when my special guest will be you, my listening audience. with another opportunity to appreciate our rich cultural history and learn how it impacts on our lives today. Until then, I'm out of here. For the moment, peace and love, always.